Hey, hey, welcome back to the Beyond the Sequence podcast. This is Sarah Amidon and Amanda Archibald, your hosts. And supposedly, we are coming to you also live from YouTube. So we'll see how this works. We're figuring this out as we go along. What do you think about being live, Amanda?
I think it's great. You made us put our makeup on, though. You know what? Or brush our hair.
Yeah. So,
Eh,
but hey, we put our makeup on because maybe we are a little tired. I don't know. And the topic today is tired all the time and what are the cellular secrets to that? And so, but before we get into that, I just wanted to kind of touch base on like what Amanda and I are up to this fall. So, Amanda, what's coming up for you?
oh, I'm kind of rebooting part of my website to release this whole new umbrella of products. So, really kind of cleaning things up and putting everything under one name, which I'm not going to talk about right now what that name is, but that's all going to be cleaned up. So that's super exciting. And as you know, I'm headed to Portugal in about 3 weeks. I'm going to be in Europe for I was about to say 3 months. That would be awesome. But anyways,
That
three
would be
weeks.
awesome.
I know. So I'm hosting the first of our DNA wellness retreats in Portugal with Shannon Lemontier. And so really excited. It's a women only immersion looking at how DNA informs their health. So it's not just like all about DNA, but it's that was the foundation part of the retreat. Everyone's already looked at their reports, and then when we're on site, we unpack a little bit more, but in a fun group setting, and we anchor it with movement, meditation, journaling, a lot of cultural aspects like beach walking, taking a late afternoon cruise through Lisbon, and yeah, so
Ooh.
I know,
Which
like the
is
sunset's
sold
pretty.
out, by the way. Sold out. I can't
Sold
even
out.
get
Yeah, it's
in.
sold out. Yeah, so we're excited. So it should, right? Women only, time to just be with women and women across all age groups, like 30, mid 30s to late 70s. It's incredible. It's exactly what we wanted because we learn from each other. Young learn from older, older learn from younger. We all learn and you know, and there we put the kind of edges around it with women only, so that we're just there for ourselves. So that's what's coming up for me. What about you?
Yeah, at the time of this recording, this is coming into Labor Day weekend. And the last couple of years, I've gone to the AVP beach volleyball tournament right on Oak Street Beach. So it's downtown Chicago. You stay, in a hotel right there on, the Magnificent Mile or in the
Mhm.
Loop. And you just walk over and watch some of the best beach volleyball players in the world. And so this year, it's actually the AVP League Championship. So it's not the traditional tournament that's open for a qualifier and a main draw. It's teams that have already been set up that have gone through their league this whole season. So it's just Greg and I this time. The boys have come with a couple of times, and I'm like, you know what? Greg and I haven't had a lot of one-on-one time, and so I've tried to protect that space for us for this year. So a little bit of networking. A couple of my athletes are playing. I'd worked with Taylor Crabb in the last year or two, and he's playing, and he was a Tokyo Olympian. And then Melissa Humana Paredes, I'm starting to work with her, and she's our Paris Olympic silver medalist for beach volleyball. So those couple of athletes and
I
some
think
more
I'm
coming
always there
in.
with you when you're in Chicago and then you were in Long Beach or California. Like you do a couple of these more of these really
Hmm.
big trips, and yeah,
Yeah,
it's
the Manhattan Beach Open is a lot of fun. We call that the granddaddy of them all, and it's been a tournament since 1960, so long
wow,
before the AVP was even a thing. And actually, we have an international. We call it FIVB, is coming to Newport in California, Newport Beach,
nice.
and we haven't had an international tournament in the US in a really long time. And it's really sad because we have so many fans that want to see all of the international players from Norway and Germany and Switzerland and Italy. We have so many amazing teams across the world. So that's what I'm up to this weekend. I'm excited to have a little respite.
No, that'll be awesome, and hopefully the weather's good. But I was just thinking of Olympians in volleyball. So I work with Shannon Lemontier she's Lisbon-based, so she's American, trained American, but working out of Lisbon, living and working the rest of her life in Europe. But I think her brother is a volleyball player. He's an Olympian, right? He was on the Olympic team. Is it
Yes. Yeah,
Evan?
Miles Evans. Yep.
Miles Evan. That's right. Yep.
Yep. And he just won actually with his partner Chase Budinger, who played in the NBA, turned beach volleyball player.
Right.
He's 7 years in the NBA and now he's a beach volleyball player. But Miles and Chase just won the Manhattan Beach Open, so their first big AVP win after the Olympics. So congrats to
Amazing.
them. Yeah, they had a great tournament. So they keep getting better. It's really fun to watch
No
teams
kidding.
start, like, I just want to make a qualifier and then I just want to make a main draw. And wow, it would be amazing to win one of the contender events and then one of the big, elite AVP events. So it's really cool to watch players grow in that. So I could talk about volleyball all day, but we should probably get to our topic. So I think chatting a little bit about like the mitochondria and which we call it's like the powerhouse of the cell where we make all of our energy. So what happens when we have a lot of fatigue in some of our clients? And that is a pretty common occurrence for people who come to see us. By the time they come to see us, they've seen half a dozen to a dozen different clinicians trying to solve this problem of why am I tired all the time? And it's a very personal topic for me because I struggled with chronic fatigue for at least a decade, if not more. Thankfully, I've come out of that fog a little bit, and I'm able to function a little bit better. But it's one of those things like if we don't have energy, then we're not making energy. And why is that? And how do we kind of optimize those things? For me, I've just had Epstein-Barr for most of my life since I was 5. I had mono when I was 7. What 7-year-old do you know that gets mono? We usually associate that with, stress or, being in college or new exposures. So at one point at my sickest, like 9 years ago, I asked myself 3 questions, which were, are my kids fed? Are they safe? And when can I sleep again? And so you're just, all you can do is think about sleep. You're like, I've got to get to the next nap or the next, night where I can sleep. And no matter how much you're sleeping, you're not feeling rested. It's completely different than saying I'm just tired.
Right.
It's fatigue is a whole different animal. Is that something that you've seen with some of your clientele as well, Amanda?
Yes, and I think there's a lot of people with this. I'm just thinking as you were listening, as I was listening to you, they've got this sort of dragnet on their energy. For some people, it's really overt, like you said, but other people, they're not actually aware of it. They just know something isn't quite right. And I was talking to our colleague Stacy Seslowski a couple of days ago about Epstein-Barr. We need to have her on here because she's just such a powerhouse in thinking, right? She thinks of all these things like, oh, I never went down that blind alley at all. But I was talking to her about whether she was seeing this increased frequency of Epstein-Barr. And she said, absolutely. I said, it is so in our face. And she says, she really feels that COVID, it has nothing to do with the vaccine or not. It has to do with the insult of this virus that probably awakened something that was dormant in a lot of people or just didn't surface right. And so
Yes.
that's why she thinks this is where we're starting to see this peaking in Epstein-Barr. That just happened to, so if COVID served as a catalyst to something that may have been dormant or may have been kind of not even tested before, because that's what I'm seeing. I'm like, wait a minute here. When were you tested for Epstein-Barr? 2022? And you weren't treated, or it wasn't like super high numbers. Here we are 3 or 4 or 5 years later, and these people are not getting out of bed. Or as one of my clients said, it takes me 3 hours to get moving in the morning, and the alarm bells go off. So yes, 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 and yes.
Yeah, the research on COVID and long COVID is actually that we've reactivated Epstein-Barr.
Yes,
So about 98% of adults have Epstein-Barr. It just may or may not be expressing. And so there are
exactly.
certain people who, like me, who just cannot get a handle on the Epstein-Barr. And just sharing some of my lab results, like my ferritin is 8 and it's been low for a very long time. But I feel the best I've ever felt. And so to see lab work that is like, wow, that's so discouraging, but also like, but I'm not in bed for hours every day. Like I have the best energy I've had, and your body will
It adapts.
adjust.
Yeah.
It will adjust and adapt to what's going on. So that's the good news. Your body can adjust to those things. We may not completely fix everything, but we can largely move you in a more healing direction. But yes, the long COVID and the Epstein-Barr stuff, the oxidative stress. If you go
Yeah.
back and listen to our, a couple episodes ago, we're talking about oxidative stress. That's the thing that's persisting. Is we've got the infection, we've dealt with the Lyme, or we've dealt with the Epstein-Barr or the COVID, and that is not present anymore. But the oxidative stress and depletion of the mitochondria and its energy, that's really, really what's persisting.
Yeah, and it's just you mentioning oxidative stress. I want to jump in on that, but let me just go back to your ferritin being 8. So what's a normal level? Then I have another question. What's normal according to the labs versus what's Sarah's new normal?
Well, it's way higher than 8. I mean, some of the reference ranges are a little bit different, but I think, is it 100?
Yeah, and depends
130
on the
is like
lab, right?
the low end of the ferritin normal range, if I'm remembering correctly.
But when you look at your other labs, so your whole iron studies, the whole iron study, what does that look like for
Those
you?
are all normal.
Interesting. And did you ever measure your hepcidin or hepcidin?
Have not.
And because it's really interesting, boy, we could just talk about this for now, but we won't. Because the way I see it show up with some of my clients is, yeah, even their CBC is normal. And, all these different ways we can look at iron, it is normal. Your ferritin is low, but with some clients, their O2 sats are really low, which is right. And so then that's a complication for a procedure. So I was just wondering, with chronic Epstein-Barr, even if it's under control, the body's going to sequester iron, right? So that the virus can't replicate. So that's why I was wondering, like, your ferritin stores are low, everything else is normal. What's your hepcidin? Is it hepcidin or hepcidin? You know what I'm talking about.
Good question. I don't actually know how to pronounce that.
Yeah, right. HEPCIDIN.
CIDIN? Yeah.
But
Hepcidin, we'll just say.
that would be super interesting to measure for you,
Yeah, I
because
mean,
that's so
there,
instrumental. But the body is brilliant, right? It's like, no, even though your stores are low,
yeah.
it's like, nope, we're not going to let that out of there. But that would be directly associated with fatigue as well.
Yeah, there
And
was a pernicious anemia component at one point, and like
exactly,
between Hashimoto's and like, thyroid hormone, that can absolutely impact energy, but like starting thyroid hormones and like methyl B12 injection, it was like someone turned the lights on. And I was like,
yeah,
oh, this is what it's like to
this,
have energy. And I remember this so specifically because Wesley was about 9 months old and Zeke was 3. And we went to Atlanta because Greg had a work trip down there. And so I flew with the boys by myself down to Atlanta. We took the train downtown, so we didn't rent a car. It's a great city to go and not use a car.
true.
But I actually had energy to like walk around and like be with the boys alone, which up until that point I was hardly upright. And so
Yeah.
I just remember being very emotional, like walking around just going, oh my gosh, like I feel like I've lost so much
The
of my
light,
life
the
and like
lights
my
are
baby.
on.
Yeah, I've lost so much of my like baby's young, years and months that I don't even remember them. And there's a lot of grief in that where
Yeah.
there's so much lost time. So yeah, it's a whole thing, the
The
fatigue
oxidative
piece.
stress component, and we'll kind of go backwards to the mitochondria because there's so many layers here. And you and I were talking, there's layers. So if you're a practitioner listening, you just think upstream, right? We think of layers and we're going to go all the way to the layers. If you are, as Dawn Waldron says, an expert patient, we're going to unpack it a little bit more slowly for you, but you'll know how to go and research things. But, the central energy production mechanism. There's sort of a number of pieces here, but the central mechanism is going to be the Krebs cycle that feeds into the electron transport chain. And we'll get to that a little later and unpack it. But you'd mentioned oxidative stress, which are the body's always going to put out as part of living these free radicals. But if oxidative stress gets high and free radicals are what's taking place there, the body's unable to mitigate, they will impact that cycle where you kind of flow, nutrient information around this cycle at which it gets unpacked and you produce the currency of the body, ATP. But one of our great colleagues who taught us, Christine Houghton, made this point a number of years ago. Oxidative stress slows that cycle. It can block it. So you can get all the fat and carbohydrate ready, to flow into this cycle. And the next step in, like cisaconate, so a citric acid, will get blocked by oxidative stress. And when that gets blocked, it's almost like a reverse mechanism. You'll actually reverse that cycle into creating fats, literally, and you go even worse, you'll kind of push into another cycle, push back to glycolysis to produce ATP, but it's highly inefficient. So if you're ineffectively producing ATP, you're producing 2 instead of 36 or 38, how do you feel? How do you feel, Sarah? You've been there.
Terrible. I mean, if you're producing, excess fat at one point, like cholesterol is elevated for me too. And I'm like this thin person, I'm fit. But the cholesterol, I've said this before, acts like an antioxidant. Your body's trying to make antioxidants. Then we oxidize them and then we feel like junk. So,
Yeah. Isn't that interesting that the body, it's pushing backwards. What do I do with all this stuff? Well, I've got to make energy, but I got to store this information somewhere. And literally it's not that you go uphill or backwards. It's just a detour route to, fat is a way of storing energy. So body's going to make fat because technically you can reverse that cycle and push it back into the citric acid cycle, the Krebs cycle, or whatever we call it, TCA. We have a number of different names, but it's that critical mechanism to produce energy. So, you're a really good example of like, here's a healthy person who cannot produce energy because a virus is causing oxidative stress. And of course, if we gave you iron, that is also corrosive at a high level. Oh my gosh, there must be something wrong with you. You need iron because that's part of, the oxygen molecule, the heme molecule, right? It's a central part. So you can haul oxygen around the body. But no, it would have actually fed a virus for you if we'd done that.
yeah.
So
So, Amanda, let me ask you that. How often do you recommend iron to your clients who are iron deficient or anemic? How do you think through that?
So it's a great question. Normally we're looking for the why and not let what we're going to plug in. And it's a little different for me because the majority of my clients are midlife and beyond and often women. And so we're very careful if we were going to actually recommend iron at all. I would say almost none, zero. Because you can also get iron through food. So if that was a depletion issue, number one, I would be looking at the diet. Are they eating animal proteins at all? Not that you can't get them from plants. We just, we pair that non-heme source with vitamin C. We have to look at the gut, right? No matter what you throw and what you put in, if the gut isn't working, all bets are off. But iron doesn't work by itself. Is somebody anemic because they're missing other molecules like B12, zinc, magnesium? So we're always thinking like, what is the bigger picture versus what single nutrient do I need to throw at someone because their labs say they're inefficient or deficient? So the answer is rare for me. Is that a good answer?
Yep, and I'm the same way. And I've tried it myself. It's like I could take all the iron that I wanted to and not watch that number budge. And I hear that often from the clients that do come in. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't do iron. We need iron to live. But where is the iron going?
Yeah, where's it going?
Is it being stored heavily in tissues that's not being reflected in your blood values? Is there a chronic infection that we're trying to fight? Because iron responds a lot to inflammation. So that's more, we got to address the inflammation. You can't just give iron and see that this is going to fix the problem because the iron will oxidize and create more inflammation.
It
So,
does, and in one of the areas that you're so well versed in, which is heavy metals, toxic exposures and mold. When you have heavy metals exposures and you add iron, that is probably one of the most corrosive things you can do. Like you said, it will oxidize. It's like, just give me some more rain with the iron, and we've got some more rust in the body. So iron is essential to metabolism. It's essential to the citric acid cycle, but the body works at physiologically compatible levels, which is called food. And supplements are added as a rider or a push, but they are not the solution. So
mhm,
our work is always to think upstream. Where's the aperture? Where's the opening? Or where's the loss? Or where's it
mhm.
being stored?
Yeah,
Good
exactly.
question.
So, supporting the mitochondria, you use this metaphor like mitochondria as your body's Wi-Fi router. I really liked that. So if that's offline, your whole system is disconnected. Is that a metaphor you've used in the past, or care to elaborate a little bit?
No, I definitely, yeah, the router, right? I thought that was pretty cool. But I also like to think of things as being online and offline because we can all relate to that. But some people may not even know what a router is. So I actually think, yeah, the mitochondria are a router, really steering the molecules into the electron transport chain, which is like the ultimate energy plan. It doesn't matter what the energy is either, whether it's wind or water or solar, what have you. In the end, the body, everything we're doing is steering information into that kind of power plant highway. But we are definitely seeing a lot of patients, clients, where their energy production plants, it's not that they're not working, it's like they're not online all the time. So, or they're inconsistently online. So, yeah, the Wi Fi router keeps going down. Been there, done that. So,
Yeah, I speaking of Wi-Fi routers, this is kind of the total opposite end of the spectrum, but for people who have chronic fatigue or chronic pain, I had read this paper a couple years ago, and I'm married to an electrical engineer, mind you. So I had read this paper about increased virulence and antibiotic resistance of E. coli and staph in the presence of EMF. And I thought to myself, well, that's really interesting. I wonder what would happen if I put either my phone on airplane mode on my nightstand or if it's like 5+ feet away, because it's exponential with exposure. And over a couple of days, the pain on one side of my body slowly melted away. And so I've had a couple of potential clients and clients come into me with chronic pain or chronic fatigue that I said, where do you have a smart meter that's like outside your on the outer wall above your headboard?
oh,
Do you
wow.
have your Wi-Fi router in your room or on the other side of the wall? So, like, where are you located near some of these EMF things? Or are you wearing like an Apple Watch at night that you're having this constant
Yeah.
pinging with your body? So it can change kind of the polarity of the cell, and bacteria is interacting with it. So I was like, well, if that works for bacteria, I wonder if that could work for viruses. And I don't have any research on that. It was just kind of like, well, if we see shifts in even bacteria, what do we have in our gut that makes up most of our like immune system? We have got, bacteria in our microbiome. And so our body responds to our environment. And some of us are just way more sensitive than others. And I'm one of those people. I tried to wear a whoop strap and I felt like my arm was burning, and
Wow.
it felt hot. And so it was something I was like, I can't have EMF on my body all the time. Think about your cell phone. If it's like in your bra, in your back pocket, putting it directly on your body, or even like ear pods and things like that. Just if you are so sensitive that like you've got chronic pain and chronic fatigue, that's something I would seriously consider like trying to limit, because it will change how your body responds and makes energy, in my opinion, and in the research. So
Absolutely makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, I know you've
kind of
mentioned that
wild.
before.
Yeah, it's a little out there, but it's free to try it out. It doesn't cost you anything to turn your Wi-Fi router off at night or to put your phone on airplane mode or get it away from your body. So what I'm saying costs you nothing. And even if it was a placebo effect, hey, if that helps you,
But
great.
it's an interesting point, Sarah, because we're in an AI and data and wearables
Mhm.
revolution. Gosh, we can measure everything about you now, providing you wear it. And yet,
Yeah.
what we're wearing, I don't know enough about this, but it's an interesting thought for those of you listening. Like, you ever thought that what you're actually wearing is not benign? It's not formulated to create harm, but exactly your experience. And I think, I'm going back 20, 30 years to, I used to go to the Eco Farm conference, which is amazing in California. And back that was the early days of cell phones. And I remember people being very disturbed in that audience saying, any of you with cell phones, please sit away from us. We thought they were like, oh, come on. They were probably right.
Yeah.
I certainly cannot imagine having my cell phone like in my ear at night, or even listening to an app. And it's an interesting thought. I wanted your thoughts about this, given that you're so sensitive. So many of the wonderful things we can do to work with emotional wellness or for breathing or meditation are streamed through our phones or our tablets. And I always think that, well, how do I do that? I don't want to look at a bright screen. How do I listen to something that might help me sleep, but not get,
Mm.
those waves? I actually don't know how to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah, using things that are cabled instead of wireless
Oh yeah.
can be
Yeah.
helpful. Otherwise, using a speaker phone, like so
Yeah, I
instead of
do that.
talking, with your phone up to your ear, using it on
Use the
speakerphone when you
speaker.
can. I tend to prefer wired headphones anyways. I do have, wireless ones for the occasional need for that, but I try to limit it for the
Yeah, no,
reasons I
totally.
just stated. And some people, again, are just more sensitive than others. This is not a blanket
No,
recommendation.
not at all. But it's great observation from yourself, but also in clinical practice. Hey, if you're not thinking about this, think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And even
I
just
like
the
that.
ways in which blue light impacts even glucose and insulin signaling, we're seeing that more often. So you can, for free, go into your settings on your computer, on your phone, and go to display and turn your blue light filter, or we call it
On.
night mode, on 24 hours a day. Not just like if you're doing photo editing or blueprints and that's part of your job. I understand that, but most of us do not need that much blue light, and frankly it's manipulating you into being more addicted to your device, which nobody needs. So the competitive spirit in me is like, I refuse to let anyone manipulate me. Like I'm like, nope, stick it to the man, and get that out of here. So but anyway, yeah, I know we got off a little on a tangent, but
But the
so
tangents are where the morsels are, I think.
yes, they really are. I enjoy a good tangent. So we were talking about the causes of mitochondrial depletion, our infections, chronic stress is a huge one. Toxic exposure, even overtraining or not recovering quickly enough from your workouts. So, top red flags that tell you that mitochondria are going offline. What do you think? I think,
Um, just the client, the patient human story that I'm walking around in a fog. My sleep is, I may be sleeping, but I'm waking up unrefreshed. The brain fog piece, like I said, we know we would look at gut hormones, thyroid as well. But I think it's just the idea that people are very open now and say, I don't feel right. I'm doing all the right things, but I feel inflamed. I feel deeply tired, or like I'm walking through sludge or mud, or something that we would pick up on, but an individual may not, like the recurrence of infections, which are very, very depleting. Usually my signs, but because of the nature of my patient population, they're in midlife transition and beyond, there's definitely a hormonal piece, which we need to talk about as well. But there's a huge environmental piece as well. So I'm kind of going beyond the question to, that's usually what I'm picking up on. The excessive fatigue, or the I'm sleeping, but I'm not refreshed. What are you seeing? And then we're going to unpack it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree on that. And I've had a few clients come in and go, I saw my primary care, I saw a specialist, and they told me it was all in my head. So I
Classic.
hear that again and again. And I don't, it just makes no sense to me how a clinician would ever say that to somebody. Why would they be coming in to see you? Now, there's the occasional drug seeking patient, but
Yeah.
most of the time, we've got patients who've just been suffering for a really long time and they just want a clinician to listen. And I've been doing some mentoring with some other clinicians and health coaches and interns recently. And something I've shared with them, just because my background in my undergrad was communication, I had a minor in psychology, and I've been a patient for so long, is when I start my initial consultation, I really enjoy allowing the patient to have time to share their story because they've been through so much trauma, and
Mm-hmm.
like unpacking and allowing them to have a space to just go, this was really hard, and like validating that. We develop rapport that way. And it's just such a beautiful time to get that emotion out so that we can then rebuild.
No, I
I don't know.
agree.
Yeah.
At
So
which
just trying to
point,
be on the,
go ahead.
go
Sorry,
ahead.
Sarah. I just say at which point the trauma of the constant health care or disrepair cycle has set in, and they're emotionally depleted as well. And no one can help me, so there must be something wrong with me. I think just a comment on you and I see very, very patients or individuals who have a lot of complexity to their situation, which with our training, we're actually able to see through to, okay, we know how to start this, how to get to root cause here. It takes a while. But I think part of the issue, there's two parts of the issue on the healthcare side. Number one, not enough time with a patient and I will defend the healthcare practitioner on that. You cannot do what we do in 15 minutes. So let's change the system and not beat up on our healthcare provider. I'm not defending poor care, but I am going to defend the fact we now have a system where how on earth can you expect any health and medical provider to do anything when they are, strapped to the rigors of a system that doesn't work? That's number one. Number two, on the healthcare side, you have to not ignore the fact that the body runs on biochemistry. This is it. This is biochemistry is the science of all the signals and all the information that comes into the body and what the body does with that. And unless you're fluent in it, as we're going to get into here, you can't really help people. You can measure and you can react to the measures in the labs, and you can do the psychology and the traumatic and the teaching and the talking piece, yes. But you can't get people to well unless you understand how the wheels of their biochemistry are working and where the openings are that we need to jump into. So that
Yeah.
is on the practitioner side. So that's my.
Yeah. And then, I mean, the unfortunate thing is it feels like insurance companies are trying to practice medicine by limiting, what they're going to cover. That's not medically relevant, or there's another way to do this. Like, oh, a client or friend of mine had wanted to have a hysterectomy. She's in her 40s. And their response was, we're not going to cover the surgery because we think you can solve this problem with just putting in an IUD. And so
Wow.
that is like, well, no, she wants one and her children are grown. Not that you should ever have to justify what you think your body needs, but if your doctor is supportive of trying to change your physiology to improve a situation, then who's an insurance company to say that you shouldn't when the doctor says, yeah, we should? So
Exactly. Oh my gosh.
that part has been hard to watch and is continuing to increase. And at some point, I think the whole insurance thing is going to collapse because
Uh,
you've alienated all of the practitioners who now are not taking insurance,
exactly.
and therefore all of the patients who would pay for insurance can't get coverage for anything, so they're just going to direct pay to all their clinicians and get rid of insurance policies altogether. So
Which is where we were
where
headed a
yeah,
while
this
back.
is where
And
we're
yeah.
headed. It's wild to me. But yeah, I think the biochemistry piece, that's why we're here.
That's why we're here. So should we talk
Yeah.
about the biochemistry of
Yeah.
energy? Should we roll in
Yeah.
that?
Yes, please. What's the what kind of core genes are we talking about here?
So I'm actually going to go back to core mechanisms and then let's do the genes, right? Because if you think about it, people say, well, how do I get my energy back? And what we're talking about is, from our perspective, is how do you get the nutrients into the body to fuel energy production, right? So we're not going to talk about the gut today, but the gut has to be in working order, right? Whole other
Hmm.
conversation, and that will be the end of the broadcast because that's all we would talk about. So let's assume you have nutrient availability and the gut is, allowing you to absorb what you need. And this can be our favorite topic because we're going to name our favorite nutrient. You have to get information into a cell, which means you have to get across the membrane that surrounds the cell. So you got to get it into the cell, then you have to get it across another membrane, which is also where genes come in. So how do we get, are we ready, Sarah? How do we protect the integrity of the cell wall? Like, what food information needs to be available so that we can pass information across that cell membrane? Number one, what is
Yeah.
it?
I mean, the first thing that pops in my mind when we talk about cell wall integrity is fat. So choline, I just go to choline, like
Choline.
go back to our choline
Go
episode
back to
and
the
hear all about
choline,
that.
yes.
Yeah, having the structural integrity of the cell and all of the mechanisms that are involved with that. Fat is feels like sometimes the start of it. We think of all of our macronutrients, but what's keeping everything together? Just like if we didn't have skin, we wouldn't have anything holding all these organs in.
Exactly, exactly. And so you have to have healthy cells, right? But you have to have a healthy cell wall. So you need your fats. All fats count. But choline is so instrumental to the fluidity, right, of that cell membrane. It's kind of like an amoeba. It has like a floppy membrane, but you need saturated fats to give it structure. So choline, once again, our best friend choline, is part of the molecule phosphatidylcholine, which helps give that fluidity to the membrane. So the genes that involve, well, first of all, there's a nutrient in the food, right? And genes that can signal that we might need more choline support. We've talked about them in the choline and even probably in the folate podcast. We would look at PEMT, PEMT, and MTHFD1. But I was thinking about this morning, Sarah, that there's another gene we don't really talk about, but it comes up when we're looking more in the brain space, CACNA1. I think that's it, CACNA1, which is instrumental to calcium channel
Calcium
building,
channeling.
right? And
Yeah.
signaling. And that is so important to import information in and out of the cell. It's sort of a little bit of aside from the conversation, but you and I know when we're looking at brain and we're looking at behavior and, what's going on with signaling in the brain. A lot of times with kids who are in that space, that CACNA1 often comes up. It's like, it's sort of not the first one we look at, but it's there and it's sort of like, is it on? Is it off? What's it doing? And it is
Well,
playing a role.
yeah, and actually just this week I had a client who's a friend of mine and she has horrible migraines. And that was one of her homozygous SNPs, and I don't see it very often. So
Yeah.
I was like, okay, let me read a little bit more. So I just happened to have a client this
Yeah.
week where I'm like trying to understand these mechanisms, but I think that calcium channeling, it's involved, yes, in like migraine, manifestation and nervous system
It
kind
is
of dysfunction, but then mood disorder stuff. So
100%.
neurotransmitter signaling too. And so it's kind of wild. Like, how do we, put the skin on the calcium channeling to like hold it all together? But yeah, the phospholipid piece with choline makes a lot of sense for that.
Yeah, and I remember our colleague Stacey also talking about how integral that calcium channel signaling is to insulin signaling.
Mm,
Yeah, I'm sort of, I have to go back and remember her lecture, but it's sort of one, those of you who may be practitioners listening in and in the genetic space, like take a look at the frequency of that when you're thinking about neurological. It's very, very interesting. So that energy, so we just went gut, cell, And then, like, assuming you can get information into the cell, then what we want to do is start to get information from carbohydrates, fats, protein into this critical cycle called the citric acid cycle. It's also called the Krebs, so Krebs cycle. And you can kind of think of that as filtering nutrient information onto a traffic circle or a roundabout, right? So it comes in at a certain entry point, and then it has to go through a lot of sort of molecular transformation, so a change of those molecules to get it ready for that final like runway. But what's interesting, Sarah, and this is where people get all sort of in a tizzy about, well, I just need all my B vitamins. It is true that to even get into that cycle, so let's say you're eating carbohydrates, they get transformed into a molecule called pyruvate. Pyruvate, then to go into the best energy production cycle, which is the Krebs cycle, has to be transformed, and it takes 5 B vitamins. We're going to name them like 1, 2, 3, 5, and now I'm missing one, so there's 4, and it's alpha lipoic acid. Sorry, so 4 and 1. And it so happens, so B1 is what? Thiamine, 2 is riboflavin, 3 is niacin, and 5 is pantothenic acid. And there's probably more I'm even missing there. But it just so happens that vitamins 2 and 3 are also instrumental to the methylation cycle as well, which we talked about. Go back and listen to that podcast. We never leave that cycle. And that cycle feeds into energy. So we'll come back to that. But in other words, if you cannot fire up and fuel this cycle if you're in an inflamed state, we have a lot of oxidative stress, so we deal with that. But if you're eating the same 10 foods, then you're going to...
Even if they're healthy foods.
Even if they're healthy foods, you cannot step off the pyruvate train and jump onto the Krebs train without these critical nutrients. And throwing a huge B complex, product at this is like me always saying you're turning up the tennis ball machine and you can't return the serve. The body's going to be the same way. It's like it responds to physiologically compatible levels of nutrients. It's called food. And you just use supplements as a kind of a rider, right? As a help while you try and correct the underlying flow that could be the issue here. So I cannot stress how important those B vitamins are to get to that step. But you can throw all those B vitamins at your system. But like you're saying, you're walking around with Epstein-Barr and it's active. We have to kind of remove the oxidative stress, try and rebalance the immune system to take the foot off the virus pedal there so that this mitochondrial cycle can work. So that's sort of that first step. What are your thoughts on that, Sarah? Because we talked about nutrients there, not genes. Genes are coming.
Yeah. No, I think that's well said. And you clearly have, 10 years of experience on me, maybe more. And so I'm like, the fact that you so well, recall the citric acid cycle is amazing to me. I'll get there someday. I still use my reference pathways, but maybe that's a resource we need to help with our clinicians.
Yeah, no, we're talking about, right, doing something like biochemistry you wish your grandma taught you. No, it's not your grandma's biochemistry.
Not just your mama's biochemistry.
Right. Yeah, the biochemist, the Betty Crocker of biochemistry, like book. But no, it's super, super important. And then like you get to the end of the Krebs cycle, that's where you fire it into the electron transport chain. That's I want to say the coal fire plant, but that's like, that's sort of like, where we really produce energy. And even when you get into there, if you don't have the nutrients placed, here's your CoQ10, here's your vitamin E, and your selenium. And those would be your majors, but you have, everything that's come from that Krebs cycle, which requires B2 and B3 as well, then flows into electron transport chain. So how on earth are you going to produce energy if you don't have the base nutrients to fire up this beautiful, like, mechanism that is what nature created for us? However you see how we were created, it's brilliant.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a little bit more carnitine
I
needs
was going to bring
for
that up. Talk to us about that.
yeah, I beat you to it, I guess. But yeah, I've been seeing a little bit more carnitine needs, and that shows up in some of our genomic testing as well. But even then, when I liken it to, if you're a flower that's just wilting, you're a wilting flower. How do we get that flower standing upright again? And normally that's like adding water, but sometimes you got to fertilize it too, and give it the nutrients it needs to get it standing back up again. But the carnitine is a
Hmm.
transporter molecule to utilize fat in the
Yes.
fasted state called beta oxidation. And so that one is pretty big too. Like maybe we have excess fat on the body and adipose tissue that we're just not utilizing. And so
Exactly.
for some clients who maybe have some either fatigue or chronic pain, have a client recently who was having like hand pain and things like that, and his job had him using his hands, and it was really really important for his job. And so I looked at his genes, and he tried everything, and he's a pretty brilliant clinician himself, and we added some carnitine, and it took a couple of weeks, but he's improved, and he's like, the pain's gone, and he can now continue to do the thing that he was doing. And so really really cool, just so simple, even when you feel like you've tried everything. Amanda and I love to go, okay, tell me what you've tried,
Yeah.
and like we're just computing,
We
in
are
our heads with
computing.
what are we missing. And sometimes it's a matter of removing that toxic exposure, because we know that like heavy metals will disrupt the Krebs cycle.
100%.
So removing that, because it's just slowing down everything, and the
It is.
on ramp and off ramp of the Krebs cycle. Things are coming in and things are coming out, and they're handing things off like batons. But we have to support all areas of that in order to make enough energy. And if we're just constantly depleting it with an infection or with a
Hmm.
mold in your home and constant stress, we're just never going to get ahead of it.
And the other thing is, and I'll just bring up Dawn, I want to come back to carnitine, but you talking about the heavy metals and things that block the forward flow of the cycle. She calls it flux. So Dawn Waldron, she's a British practitioner, really sort of retired from seeing patients now, but doing so much thinking and education in the oncology, well, integrative oncology. She's very much a subscriber to the metabolic approach to cancer. It's just such a good educator, but she really talks about flow, like forward flow and reverse flow, backward flow of the Krebs cycle. So forward flow is catabolic, which means we're breaking down, we're producing energy. When you reverse or slow the Krebs cycle, as we talked about already, you basically can go into a growth or anabolic cycle, which means you're pushing backwards and you are producing energy, but it's a very, very slow energy, and you're pushing back to lactate as well. So it's a highly inefficient system. And it's akin to a growth system. It's akin to an anabolic process, which is sort of, and I'm jumping through a lot of hoops here to say this is where we think some of the seeds of cancer are. When we reverse
Mm.
the Krebs and you're going backwards, and then there's an overlay. What do we do with all this stuff? So her work is really, really useful. So Dawn Waldron, and Flexible, I think, is her Substack. It's her work. You can also see her talk with Emma Bezic with Life Code in the UK. So just to mention to her how important, like you said, the impact of things like cadmium, aluminum, BPA, anything that harnesses our cells and harnesses the Krebs cycle is toxic. And that's why we see with toxicity, we see people who are doing all the right things, they can't lose weight, they're gaining weight, they're getting fatter and fatter as they say, but I'm doing all the right things. Oh, it must be my hormones. But actually it's a mitochondrial issue. It's actually a mitochondrial crisis, because we're talking about energy and how we're blocking the natural flow of energy. The carnitine piece, you and I kind of not stumbled, it's come across our conversations a lot with when we're comparing notes about patients, and for many, many different reasons. And so genes we look at, SLC22A5 SLC is always a transporter. So when we're looking at 3x4 genetics, they will show us that gene. It's in the membrane, right? Cell membrane. And the CPT1A is different, that it's a transporter of long-chain fatty acids, or it facilitates, that gene encodes the protein that facilitates the transport of long-chain fatty acids via carnitine into the mitochondria, which is exactly what you said. Like, and I'm seeing it too. We can add in a little bit of carnitine with these patients. We know they're struggling. It tastes terrible, but as I've heard, like, why did you give that to me? I'm like, I'm so sorry. But it's like a little bit of a gasoline, right? Like, boom, let's grease this avenue and help flow these fatty acids that would love to get into the mitochondria, because they are energy producers. Like, they're a high octane source of energy. So a lot of our work is like, oh my gosh, what's going on environmentally? What's blocking the flow? What role are genes playing, right, in opening up or producing the proteins, whether they're transportation proteins or whatever they're enabling. So good
Yeah,
point.
I was recently helping and working with a client who has type 1 diabetes, and that's definitely not my area of
Yes.
expertise. But I had read a paper after seeing her high carnitine needs, and just kind of was like, is there a connection with like type 1 diabetes and this carnitine piece? And you need carnitine for insulin to actually like act on muscle. And you also need carnitine to produce butyrate in the colon. And so
Bingo.
there's just a couple of really like interesting tidbits that if you have a carnitine deficiency, whether that starts with your genetics or you have a chronic condition, it's like, well, it sounds like to me, most type 1 diabetics could actually benefit from carnitine, supplementation, but also like vegetarians and vegans, we think of carnitine as con carne. Like, where do we largely get that from? And so my husband, who's a vegetarian, he's been utilizing carnitine, and that's been a game changer for him as well. So there's not that I'm suggesting everybody go out and supplement it, but
Don't just only start taking it.
yeah, it's just really interesting components to. I'm seeing tons of BPA in clients these days too, and you're completely disrupting metabolism of so many things. So just to echo everything you said.
Yeah, and it's interesting you talk about butyrate. So butyrate is so instrumental to how the cells of your gut work. I mean, it is what actually stimulates beta oxidation so they can function and be healthy. How is it working when you were looking at the research with the muscle, and how's that showing up with your husband too? How's it helping him?
Energy wise, he's been doing carnitine and creatine with his workouts. And I may have shared this on a previous podcast, but his goal was to go from like a large t-shirt to a medium. And then he started actually like eating enough protein, like I recommended, and then a couple of these more targeted supplements for him. And he cannot go down to a medium because his biceps got so big that he now will not fit in a medium. So props to him, and snaps to him, because he's worked really hard on just kind of modifying his body composition. And so the unintended consequences of like really targeting and honing in on a couple of things, even if you have a different kind of diet than most of the world. But yeah, so amazing.
I was just thinking too, like of the carnitine, it can emphasize how important that is and how often that comes up with people who are fatigued or really depleted. How often it's not carnitine deficiency, it's carnitine inefficiency or availability to
Yeah.
transport those fats across the mitochondria. And some people may have a gene FABP2 that loves to absorb these long chain fatty acids. You've got to put them somewhere. So now you've got a kind of logjam of long chain fatty acids. Well, where do I go? Where do I go? And you're depleted in carnitine, or there's inefficiency with these genes. That's exactly where we may use a supplement, just to try and top off the metabolics or the mechanism to sort of ease the flow.
I think I've utilized like carnitine and mitochondria support also for clients who have lipomas. So we've got like fats that have deposited in certain places that aren't being utilized that we can
Interesting.
hopefully support that a little bit, and it's been had good results. I haven't had enough, testing that with it's not like I see tons of lipoma clients, but just one or two that, have a little bit of excess fat storage somewhere. So
That's a good point. My dog Max, who died in 2015, but he was a lab, but constantly developed those lipomas. You see that with
fatty
dogs.
tumor, yeah.
Fatty tumors. I'm like, where's this coming from? I never thought about carnitine. See, 10 years later, I should give my dog carnitine, but that's a great point. So I guess, what about, let's go back to genes then and talk about energetics, right? So that's kind of a big word because it has different meanings depending on where we're practicing or what our philosophies are. But, we talked about like the Krebs cycle and how the nutrients we need to get that cycle to work so we can produce energy, but we also have genes that help us signal to engage, to initiate energy. Do you want to jump into that? Like things like AMPK, PPAR, geez, things
I
that
think
we look
that's more
at.
of your area of expertise because you've been
Through
the
it,
teacher on that
Sarah.
one. I'm going to toss that bone back to you.
Oh man, I get the baton. So of course, Sarah and I both mentor and teach, and I do teach and mentor clinicians and how to, practitioners, how to even begin to understand genomics in practice so they can work with those of you who would like to take advantage of it. But one of the areas that is fascinating is how do cells, or how do our genes encode proteins that tell us turn on the energy burning process, what turns it on, what turns it off. And this is also useful for us to send how the cell decides, do I need to burn energy or make energy? So we have genes like AMPK, so AMPK, that are energy sensors in the cells. Like, how do you know, like, you need to eat? The body knows this and it senses it in a number of ways. But AMPK is this master sensor that we can actually measure. And when you are energy depleted, let's say you're fasting, AMPK is one of the genes we look at, and it turns around and hits another master gene that we love to look at. It's got a long name. We can't even type this here, can we? You can't put a chat because we're streaming live, but it's called PPARG. So PPARG-C1A. We call it PPARG-C1 alpha. It's a master switch in the body. So AMPK is a detector, and it turns around to one of the master genes, PPARG-C1 alpha, and that then turns around to another gene, PPAR alpha, PPAR alpha, and says start burning fat. Go to your adipose tissue, your fat stores, and release energy. So it's like they're in a line, right? Or it's like going down I don't live in a city, but you've
The
got long,
conveyor belt.
yeah, what?
The conveyor belt.
A conveyor belt, or when you're sitting on one of those long roads, you can see all the traffic lights that are green, right? And you're like, oh man, if we can make it through the next traffic light. That's the signaling like highway in the cell. It's bam, bam, bam. Need energy. Good. Relay a signal to one gene that relays a signal to the next gene that says, okay, release energy. And then where does that energy go? It has to be funneled into that Krebs cycle in the electron transport chain. So what we see in genetics, we're actually often able to look at these genes and the form they're in to know whether somebody is going to have a little bit of a more sluggish flip of the switch to start to access your energy. And it shows up. We know immediately when we see these genes, if they're in on, sluggish, or off position, then we say, oh gosh, you're not going to readily be able to burn fat if you keep eating. In other words, we may alter when you're eating. We're going to look and see, would intermittent fasting kind of really stoke these genes into action? Would time restricted eating be better for you? Would keto be better for you? This is where we know there's certain genes we look at and say, it's not that you couldn't do keto. It's the way we onboard it for you. And maybe the how we organize the macronutrient percentages that change when we look at genetics. And the other thing I learned, Sarah, this is like this little pearl. I was reminded of it recently. So you have this master switch AMPK, but upstream from that is another gene, AIDPOQ, that is it actually. Oh, this is so brilliant! I love this when you suddenly look in science. Say, look at this piece of information. So this gene, ADIPOQ, which helps produce adiponectin, which is also this master sensor in the cell. Like it's produced in your adipose tissue and says, hey, release fat, release energy to the body. That also will turn on AMPK. So you've got all these little mechanisms. And guess what also works with adiponectin? Or that gene. And I thought this was brilliant.
Tell me, I don't know.
I know,
Tell me.
right? HDL.
Oh,
HDL. So think about this, people. So we're talking about the catabolic side. How do you release energy? How do you break down stuff so we can fire up, your energy production machine? So HDL also works in a catabolic way. It doesn't activate adiponectin, but it helps that gene express. So it sort of influences it. It's a good way to look at it. So the flip of it, so if you have low levels, so let's carry on. If you have lower levels of HDL, which happens, right? So it can happen genetically, it happens because you're not moving or other reasons like midlife. Lower levels of HDL, you're losing an ignition switch for energy production. And what we often see, and you went through it as well, we can have, and I've had higher levels of LDL, that happens in midlife as well. Higher levels of LDL are like higher levels of insulin. They are anabolic. They stimulate mTOR. So guess what? When we see people like, so all of a sudden my HDL is low, my LDL is high, and I keep putting on weight, it's one more metabolic switch. And our job is to say, well, it's not to say, what are you eating? It's to say, why is the body reversing a flow? Why is it pushing down a building or a growth or an anabolic pathway versus a catabolic or a breakdown pathway? And that's our job. It's like, what is stopping the flow? And then a lot of times it's biochemistry. It's not, oh, are you doing something wrong? You're eating too much meat, or you're, eating too much sugar. It's like, no. There's something that's altering signaling and switching.
well said. That was a good lesson. Thank you.
It was amazing, huh? So I
That's so
just
cool.
picked up on that this morning when I was reading Dawn's work, and something came up like, wait, I didn't know that switch was there. But again, it's something to think about. So
I love that. Yeah,
I
that's
do
such a great
too.
lesson. I hope the clinicians who are listening are taking notes because those are really good clinical pearls.
Yeah, and guess
Um,
what? Some of you are like, well, how do I turn all this stuff on? How do you activate like these master switches? Um, don't eat all the time, right? So your body needs an off switch, has on switch and off switch. Yeah, there's a time to eat, there's a time to stop eating, okay? And work with your practitioner on what's best for you. We're not going to get into all the advice here because we look at genetics to determine that in our work or to help with that, of course, in your lifestyle. But we cannot tell you how important EPA and DHA. So your omegas are probably one of the best signaling molecules to include in your diet. And if you can't get them in your diet, then you need to get them from a supplement. But do not run out there and start taking a supplement until you know you need one. So I would just say work with the practitioner, but it is such a great switch for several of the genes that I just mentioned. So it just is. It's one of the tools we use.
yeah, absolutely. What do you have any other nutrients or food strategies that you tend to go to when you're addressing the chronic fatigue, mitochondrial, depletion area?
We should ask you that.
Well, you,
I'll jump in and say two things, and you can answer that one.
yeah.
Hey, I often absolutely will say sufficient protein. You have to be
Mm.
nourished, sufficient protein, sufficient fat, and that's like a big old bucket. But you cannot survive without fat and protein. Every time you eat, please make sure there's a protein in that bite or on that plate would be number one. Number two, movement is critical. Movement is a way that your body balances everything. However, as you and I know, Sarah, when we're working with people who are fatigued, we have to remove the oxidative stress piece because, as we said, that can block energy production. So movement is critical, but it needs to be timely. If you're suffering from chronic fatigue, that is not going to be the first thing we're going to recommend. But however, as you see, that if you don't move, you will create an energy deficiency or inefficiency. But movement, let's not get into the place of, oh, you're gaining weight, so you better get to the gym. No, you're gaining weight because there's a metabolic inefficiency. We need to find what that is, remove that, and then fine tune your exercise and your movement to how your genes, to a way that harmonizes with your genes. So I kind of did exercise because a lot of times people say you're not exercising enough. That has nothing to do with this chronic fatigue piece and the people we're working with. So let's flip it over to you. Food.
Yeah, let me just piggyback on the movement piece because I like to say that movement is a nutrient in and of itself. It We can't live without movement. Our bodies are very use it or lose it. So muscle and bone, we got to stress and strain it. And then the more we increase our muscle, we actually make more mitochondria. So how do you get more mitochondria? By moving and increasing muscle mass. But yeah, it's one of those Goldilocks things. We don't want too much. We don't want too little. We want just right.
This is true.
It's so true though, because yeah, the oxidative stress piece, if you're already fatigued and you go do an hour long hit workout, you are going to be tanked.
Yeah.
So shorten, like do hit, but shorten it. Or focus on a power yoga or a weight training kind of approach to do that without necessarily increasing your heart rate to the degree that you're really tearing down and becoming more catabolic than you already are. But yeah, nutrient wise, I think you hit the nail on the head. The omega-3s are crucial, and there are just so many people who are not getting that in the diet. And let me say this clearly, that omega-3s, omega-6s too, like these are essential nutrients. They also share a pathway, and they will kind of box each other out a little bit. So if we've got too much omega-6, omega-3 may take a back seat and may not get utilized to the degree that we need it. But yeah, we've just stopped eating a lot of fish and seafood, or we don't know how to cook it. Or if we go out to eat, it's too expensive. And so, but nuts and seeds, we talk
I was
about
about
that.
to say,
Your nuts and seeds.
nuts and seeds, like if you do nothing else, right? They're powerhouses for magnesium, zinc, the B's, nuts and seeds.
Exactly. And omega-3s for some of those, some of those nuts and seeds as well.
Yes.
And supporting the oxidative stress piece, we've talked about this ad nauseum with the NRF2 antioxidant pathway and sulforaphane and high polyphenol foods. So it's managing that side to hopefully trickle down and cascade into supporting the mitochondria. Removing whatever that stressor is. You got to do that. So sometimes I'll have clients who have, chronic infections and fatigue, and we've got biofilms we need to work on. So the lipopolysaccharides that have created this biofilm to either block absorption of nutrients or are disrupting their utilization, or the bacteria that are in the microbiome can be disrupted, and that impacts nutrient metabolism. So there are some other steps that may have to go along with just food or just movement that we might have to also address.
That's a long process too.
It really is. And every time I have one, I'm like, I'm so sorry that I'm giving you so many supplements. Like, I don't want to do that. I hate doing it. But when we do some biofilm disruption, and even like a binder and then some kind of
Oil of oregano or
biofilm,
something.
yeah, they do start to feel better. And so that's really, it's one of those things that we're going to have diminished returns if we only focus on food and we only
I
focus on
agree.
lifestyle factors. If we know that we've got an infection or metals or mold or something like that going on, we're going to continue to have Epstein-Barr active. We're going to continue to have mast cell
Exactly.
activation and pot symptoms. So even sometimes just a binder can really help bind ammonia, like excess ammonia production for some of those clients. So yeah, it's not fun to have to do that, but people do see results, in 3 to 6 months, and then a year later they're like, "Wow, look where you were a year ago to where you are now."
Exactly. And sometimes when you get in there, like doing the nuts and bolts, people can feel worse before they feel better as well, which is, yeah, that's that trusting relationship. Yeah, there's
Yes,
some
and
things that are going to get released here, but that's our work, right? To
yeah, and
manage that.
start low, go slow. Some of that's body work and lymphatic massage,
Yes,
just to get like the lymphatics move all of that
I
on
agree.
out. And we got to be pooping every day. We got to poop well. We got to sleep well. Those are
Sleep well,
pretty
poop well.
pretty key for
You
the
know
circadian
the.
rhythm.
I agree. Go ahead, Sarah. Keep
Oh, I was
going.
just saying the circadian rhythm piece. So some of those lifestyle switches, if you will, that
I was
foundational.
teaching the other night and I just pulled something from actually 3x4 Genetics. Sometimes I get behind with some of their infographics and things they put out. And sometime this year, they put out this great chart about the circadian rhythm and how it impacts energy production, thermogenesis, off gassing of heat when we produce energy, which we've not talked about another time. But what I hadn't realized, and it just goes back to the brilliance of, Chinese medicine and all the medicine and philosophy that came before Western medicine. And we know that the Chinese medicine has a clock, the body has energy, rhythms, and a clock. And what I hadn't realized that in the middle of the night, like our leptin levels are highest at 2 o'clock in the morning. And
Mm,
oh my gosh, and our energy production molecules like PPAR gamma, which also prods at our adipose tissue and at the liver to release glycogen so we can, release a carbohydrate or glucose. That's very active. So is ADIPOQ that I talked about, like after 6 o'clock in the morning. Like, let's say it starts between 6 and 8, which makes the point that you need to be eating during the day because leptin, that's very high at 2 in the morning, is signaling to the body, you do not need to eat. We got stuff we need to do. So it's a satiety hormone, right? But it's brilliant that these hormones, so your hormones have a circadian rhythm. And I just wanted to bring that up. It's amazing. And we could see that genes can disrupt that signaling as well. Like, that's why people are up at 2 in the morning, like I'm hungry. Okay, well, we need to regulate that and see where the disruption is.
yeah, that happens a lot with clients where they're eating pretty late at night. If you add alcohol on top of that, which is going
Oh,
to your body will preferentially detoxify, metabolize alcohol before the other food you've eaten. And
yep.
so if weight loss is your goal and you're, a daily or a few times a week alcohol drinker, you're actively sabotaging yourself.
Yeah, it's interesting. And
It's
your B
it's a
vitamins, by the way.
and your B vitamins. Yeah, it's a bummer, but yeah, the eating later at night and it's sort of like your desk has the inbox and all the files are sitting in and this is all the food and the nutrients you got to process, but then the outbox is sort of slowed down because now you've gone to bed. You're not using that fuel. So if you do eat later in the evening, go for a walk,
Yeah,
like
do that.
start to use that fuel before you go to sleep. And you may, have a better stable blood sugar at night and not be waking up in the middle of the night.
100%.
So,
Yes, I can speak to that myself, having really noticed the impact of alcohol. It will wake you up because your blood sugars have tanked and you're looking for something. And yeah, it was amazing how sleep improves when there's no alcohol on the landscape at all. And it's not It's not a hey you, it's like it's true. So
Well,
um
for better or worse, the alcohol consumption is like the lowest it's ever been.
isn't that
There's
amazing?
been recent research, especially, young people of drinking age now are they're just not drinking, and maybe they've got other vices too for,
Yeah,
things that they're going to go to for
true.
satiation, social media or vaping, who knows what it is, but alcohol is the lowest it's ever been, but alcohol is also very expensive,
It
especially when
is.
you go out to eat and like I don't know.
It
It's
bumped your
lost its
bill.
luster.
It has, but you know what, too? That the non-alcoholic category is growing. What whether it's mocktails, which are basically like juice,
Juice,
different juice, like good juices and like a tonic or whatever.
carbonated,
But
yeah.
yeah, or the non-alcoholic beer category is huge. And I kind of looked at that myself and said, well, let me try non-alcoholic beer. I can't taste the difference. So there you go. If you want a beer, you can have it without your alcohol and your vice, So that's been interesting to look at that. Sarah, I wanted to just go back to energy real quick. And I guess we're sort of kind of getting towards the closing stretch here, but one of the things I found that's useful with my clients who are really depleted, because what you're hearing us say is we have to find what the blocks are, bring the cells back online, which takes time. And if the gut's involved, like you said, there is a virus or something bacterial, it just takes time. And that's our job to kind of lay out the timeline and say, you cannot run before you can walk biochemically. But what I do with energetics with these individuals who may not be able to move, like just trauma also gets in the way of movement. It will absolutely put like a straitjacket around you where you cannot move. And it's not about physical pain, it's emotional pain. It will just straitjacket you. But what I do have people do from the movement piece is some energetic work. So yes, some people would do breath work. That's out there for some people. So I will actually do like Qigong or something where I'll tap in where they don't have to move. And I do it myself where you can just do tapping or you're just standing and flowing. And when you use Qigong really simply, you can actually wake up your energy, your Qi. So this is a way of knowing what energy feels like without having to go to the gym or even not even going for a walk. So I use that a lot. So people are waking up their energy meridians because we have them. I mean, it's what we know so much from Chinese medicine and Eastern medicine. I'm putting it under a big umbrella, not trying to be ignorant, but that's what I'll do, because when you can feel energy, you understand signaling, you understand what your body's doing, and that is very easy to do without getting into any weirdness or whatever. So I found that myself to be not only incredibly useful, but passing that on to individuals, saying this is something you can control and wake up and your cells will respond to it because it's energy. Some people may do it through prayer, right? Or whatever, or meditation. But for some people, even it's just not within their reach. So I just want
Yeah.
to put that out there.
Yeah, the mindfulness piece is crucial. And I mention it to every client, even giving a client hope. I talked about the starting an initial consultation, giving someone space to talk about their story, but like us as clinicians being excited for what's going to happen.
I
That's
agree.
imparting hope, and we have a lot of power in that. Not to offer promises that we're going to fix everything, but just to be hopeful ourselves and looking forward to the changes that are going to happen, because healing starts with the mind. And so we can offer all of the actual recommendations of all the things that they need to do. But if we are not upbeat ourselves and positive and that what we're talking about, what we're doing is going to work, they're never going to receive it, either consciously or subconsciously. So I think you're right on with the energetic piece and just the mindfulness. So 1,000% agree there. Yeah.
Awesome. So what else? Just sort of in closing here, Sarah. What other switches? So we talked about mindfulness. I touched a tiny bit on, and we both did on breath work and some things that may not be accessible. What else comes to mind for you? I'm just looking at our quick notes here. So what else comes to mind?
Yeah, I think we talked about, or we have talked about in the past, like hot and cold, how that can kind of change and keep your body guessing a little bit too. It has an impact on epigenetic switches too. Some people will respond really well to a cold plunge, or even like cold water on the face in the morning as
Hmm.
a as an energetic movement of stuck lymphatics and neurotransmitters. So, but even just getting outside and having that sunlight exposure can make a huge difference in activating the skin and energy production.
I agree. Yeah, just as you were talking, there's just so many things that come up. But I remember working with Kate Waters in the UK, and it's like you have to, and you and I talked about when energy is stuck like it is when you're fatigued, energy can't be created or it's stuck. You have to unblock the drain. And that doesn't mean say you can do a liver detox, right? Part of unlocking the drain is activating, well, calming the immune system, but activating your digestive tract. So much of what we have to do is make sure that works. That directly cross-talk the immune system. So when you can kind of unblock the drain, right, of is the digestive tract working efficiently, when we're also moving energy, like you said, with getting sunlight, but the lymphatic system, the massages, moving energy, using qigong, and this isn't about working out. It's like these energetic inputs. Unblock the drain, unblock the lymph, get the lymph to move to remove stuff, poop to remove stuff, right? You have to poop. I know it's just like we're obsessed, but you have to because that's a toxic dump. Literally, you're removing stuff your body doesn't need. Um, so that's flowing things out, but flowing throughout the body, breath work, mindfulness, whatever that is you, it is prayer for some people. It is music for other people. That's a great outlet when I think of your family. It is music for people. So to think about the energetics, and so some people nature as energizing. So you want to think about energy in that light too. And then with those channels open, then we can fiddle more under the hood and say, what is it that's blocking energy? So there is not a script to remove the fatigue. It's like multiple pieces, okay, that are involved. So I think that's really what we wanted to talk about as well.
Yeah, I think as I said at the beginning, if you're not feeling energy, you're lacking energy, we're not making energy. And so I think we shared so many good nuggets today with just ways to optimize some of those genes and lifestyle and nutritional factors that are at play with making energy. And hopefully this was helpful for our audience.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a very complex topic, but I think sort of the final piece is you're not imagining it. If you feel like you're walking through mud, you are. And don't let anybody tell you aren't. It's not a case of there's something wrong with me. It's like we need to help you find a practitioner who can help you be heard and help you understand the journey to kind of finding that energetic light again. I think is really critical. I think that's one of the major things we probably both hear is when we're talking to our different clients is thank you, I feel heard. That is like one of the best things a practitioner can hear from another human being or a human can hear from another human is thank you for thank you for letting me talk and be heard. That's the start of a
Yeah,
journey. So
absolutely. Well, thanks for sharing your clinical gems today, Amanda. I'm looking
um,
forward to the next episode.
yeah, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? We said we do something really different.
Yeah, I think we've been in doing this for, I don't know, 8 months now, and it might be fun next time to chat a little more deeply on some of the other projects that we're working on or things that we're getting our handle into, and turning kind of the nutrition and healthcare space on its head. And it's happening. I'm feeling it. I'm starting to feel the momentum as we're bringing other clinicians onto the train with us and moving the entire field forward. People are paying attention and they're going, wait, there's something to this. So it might be fun to just talk a little bit more
Yeah.
about that.
Look under our hoods and say, what are we? What are we tinkering with? What's going on?
Yeah, so
That'll be
maybe I'll talk a
fun.
little bit about my sports space next
Yes.
time, and
Minutes on the
you can.
field.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no,
Sounds
totally.
good.
All
Well, we'll see you
right.
next time, everybody.
Yeah, see you next time.